If they didn't vet her, shame on them. If they did vet her and continued to use her, it gets to even more of a conspiratorial aspect, because it's like, okay, so if you knew she was full of shit and everything she was saying was full of shit, then why did you still elevate her in a place and in a space where we're trying to protect different groups, women, transgender people, sex workers? Why are you now doing this? Well, hello and welcome to Endemic Times. My name is Amira. I am doing something a little bit differently today, and I do want to first acknowledge out of the gate that today's video was supposed to be on Palestine. For all of you that voted on Monday, I know that you all chose to have me cover Palestine in crisis, and I want to let you all know, like I said in this community post, that yes, I am still going to be covering that subject. I just want to give it a little bit more love. I don't want to be hypocritical and only gloss over a few things. I do really want to dig deep into that. I appreciate every single one of you that voted to see Palestine in Crisis covered. I will have that video out. I'm hoping early next week. I will keep you all posted. But in the meantime, I did want to cover everything that's been happening, or at least some of what's been happening with the Eliza Bleu stuff. There is a lot of information. There's a lot of videos coming out. If you want to learn more about Eliza Bleu and her background and things like that, I do have some videos that are linked in the description box. They were some, certainly not all, but some of the videos that I was watching while I was just kind of watching this all unfold and found it very, very crazy. So yeah, we're going to be talking about Eliza Bleu. I hope you all enjoy this video. It's going to be a little bit different. I hope you like it. So please hit that like button, subscribe if you're not already. Now let's get into it. A lot of the videos that I was watching, at least at the very beginning when I was looking into Eliza Bleu and this situation as it was blowing up, a lot of those channels are more, I guess, what people would consider right-leaning media. I don't really focus on the ideological center of where people are coming from, and I don't try to use that on whether or not I watch someone's content. For me, it's really about the issues, like what is someone talking about? How are they discussing something? And if it's something that I find interesting, I really try to not care where their ideological views are. I just really kind of want to focus on the issues. So that's why some of the videos that you're going to see linked down in the description box are from channels like Chen, The Quartering, and Star Wars Girl. And like I said, those are, I guess, considered a little more right-leaning. So just kind of want to get that disclaimer out. If you're someone that doesn't like to watch any right-leaning media, just feel free to not watch those videos. But I did want to provide a little bit of some of the background of where I was getting some of the information that was also kind of framing my point of view when it came to this discussion. The other disclaimer that I do want to also put down is that there is still the very high possibility that Eliza is telling us the truth, and that maybe she is just scared, and the people that she's talking about or referring to are very, very high up in the chain that she is legitimately just very, very scared of. So if that does happen, and if more information comes down the pike and it's revealed that her story is true and that she's not lying, I will be more than happy to make a secondary video kind of talking about that and where I went wrong and where I messed up. I'll be more than happy to acknowledge that. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I did just want to put that little disclaimer out that there is always the possibility that Eliza is telling the truth. But I think, as you'll see, it doesn't look that way. So let's take a look. So as I was approaching this discussion on Eliza Bleu, the question that kept coming into my mind is, what does integrity in media look like? Because this is an individual in her background as she came up into prominence over pretty much during the pandemic. This was someone that purported herself out to be a sex trafficking survivor. And she was picked up by a lot of different media outlets. Many of them are more right-leaning, but that doesn't mean that liberal media wasn't also, looking at her and lauding over her and kind of elevating her to a place of status and notoriety when it came to the discussion of human trafficking, sex trafficking, and advocacy for survivors of human and sex trafficking. I also want to be upfront and say that I was following Eliza for some time. And when I started to follow her, I believe it was around a time when she had retweeted a tweet from one of the Epstein survivors. I don't remember which one it was at that time. I believe it was around 2001. And I was doing a bunch of research into Epstein, as well as Ghislaine Maxwell, because I was working with another channel to kind of do some coverage on Epstein. So that was what brought Eliza onto my page, onto things that I was looking at, and kind of got me looking at her. And so that was why I really appreciated what she was doing at that time. I felt that there were a lot of people not necessarily at first paying attention to the Epstein victims, and I was really worried that the whole Epstein story was going to kind of get, shoved under the rug. And so she was one of the people, when I saw her retweeting, I really appreciated that. And I thought that that was really, really important, because we do look to people that have bigger platforms that are being put onto mainstream media shows and even larger, independent media platforms here on YouTube and things like that. We do look to those people that are putting these kinds of guests on. At least for myself, I lead with the assumption that they have looked into this person and done at least a cursory glance of what this person is saying and looking at the veracity of who they are and what they're bringing to the table. So I also think that it's really hard for us as humans, as everyday people. It makes this integrity in media a huge question, because it brings to mind, who are these people? Who are they vetting? How are they vetting them, if at all? And if they aren't vetting them, why aren't they? Because these are really serious things that are happening right now. And so the question of vetting Eliza is one that I continue to have, because I really want to know whether or not someone at the Daily Wire, we'll get into that article, was even vetting her in the first place, because I get that we don't want to immediately assume that someone that says that they're a survivor is lying about it, because we shouldn't have to be this afraid and be this nihilistic that someone isn't telling us the truth and leading with, oh, this person's fake and they have all of these obstacles and hurdles to jump over in order to prove to me that they're telling me the truth. That shouldn't be how it is, but that seems to kind of be how it is. But it does seem like if someone had done a little bit of vetting, that they could have kind of easily found this out pretty quickly. So then the next question becomes, what if she wasn't vetted at all? And why did they elevate her if they hadn't vetted her? If she was and they still moved forward, then it's also a question of what maybe people would say is like a bit of a conspiracy theory of, okay, if she's not who people believe her to be, and she has been vetted, and these media outlets do know that she's lying, but it's convenient to the narrative, and because of her conventional beauty that looks great on camera, and her eloquence and intelligence and her ability to articulate so well, they're just going to use her anyway, even though maybe they know she's not as reputable as she's purporting herself out to be. So, Eliza Bleu is an individual that came to, I guess you could say, prominence in the Twitterverse in the 2020 and 2021 time, because this was during the pandemic, and her notoriety and fame just kind of blew up. And this was because she purported herself to be a sex trafficking survivor that was then turned an advocate. And because of the coronavirus shutdown, she was saying and going on to multiple different platforms that it was going to be a perfect storm for abuse. And there was an article written by the Daily Wire, and I don't even know if this is considered left or right leaning, so just bear with me, please. This is an article that was from 2020, right near the beginning of the coronavirus. And this was really when Blue started to blow up on Twitter and garner a whole bunch of followers. And this is what really gets me, is where she says, "We are here to help. I'm saying this as a survivor of human trafficking and as an advocate for those affected by trafficking. I know what it's like to have too much pride to ask for help. If I hadn't asked for help when I did, I would be dead. You're not alone in this." Now, like I said, there is still the possibility that Eliza isn't lying. She is just extremely scared to divulge who her perpetrators were. But like I said, as we're going to see, it doesn't seem like that's the case. This is an article from the Daily Beast, and this was recently done, and this is looking at Eliza Bleu, her story, the timeline of the claims that she makes, and this is also talking with her friends that are saying that they don't buy her trafficking story. And there are some really, really crazy things in this article. I am not going to cover the entire thing because it is pretty lengthy, but I want to just kind of point out some other aspects of the article. And like I said, if you want to see more, check out those links to the videos that I have in the description box below, because they really do cover a lot more of this. But it talks about how Blue refers to herself as a survivor of human trafficking and also her connection to Musk. And that was the other thing too. Eliza Bleu was doing a lot on Twitter when she was talking about the removing of child from Twitter. And sorry, I honestly don't even know what gets censored anymore and what triggers the YouTube overlords. But it was all about removing this child content that is completely unacceptable and getting it removed from Twitter. That was another part of Blue's kind of prominence and elevation into the Twitter sphere, garnering over 100,000 new followers in December alone. And it was her talking a lot about this content moderation that she was doing with Musk in order to remove content that was inappropriate and depicting children in inappropriate ways. So this was a part of this Daily Beast article that I did really want to hit on because I think it really kind of gives us a peek into what is very likely the truth about Eliza. And that was when she was on a Tim Pool's podcast. And she didn't offer any details about her alleged abusers because of what she said were unspecified legal issues. And then she continued to say, let's say hypothetically it is made up. What's my biggest win so far in public? Getting Twitter to address child sexual abuse material and make it a top priority. Addressing this kind of material is a good top priority to have. But when you are making up a story of being a survivor, and what it seems like is that she has taken incidences of other survivors, their pain, their plight, and using it as her own, and then using that as a cover to say, oh, I'm a victim, and then getting completely upset and irate when asked questions because she cannot validate and back up her story. So to say, let's say it's made up, that is a big deal. You don't have to be a survivor to advocate for survivors, but you sure as shit should not be pretending to be a survivor or using things that you did in your past that maybe you're not very proud of. Maybe you wanted to turn a new leaf, and now the story you've told yourself in your head is, I was a victim, and I had to do this thing on this music video and shake my ass for the world to see. No one's gonna judge you for that. Everyone's done stupid shit. Like, come on. Come on. But to say that you are a victim in doing that, and now, like, if it comes around that her doing that video was while she was being trafficked and she was forced to do the video, okay, that's something different. But she doesn't have any receipts to back that up. So it just kind of, there's a lot here that just doesn't add up. And the Daily Beast pieced together a rough outline of Blue's account of her trafficking experiences based on interviews she's given to sympathetic media outlets. And she said that it had spanned 2 different periods, and it was separated by roughly a decade. And she said that when she was first groomed, which was by a prominent photographer that she met at a Warped Tour when she was 16 years old, and a few years later, when she was still a teenager in the late 90s, Blue's father drove her to Los Angeles because she was convinced that an unnamed high-profile musician she met through that photographer would make her a star. This is where this aspect of her story just starts to get a little inconsistent and a little weird. And then she said, when she was in LA, that she was sexually assaulted within 48 hours of arriving into the city, according to a 2020 podcast. And her traffickers quickly hooked her onto a drug known as ice, recognized as a slang for crystal methamphetamine, though Blue said she didn't know what drug it was. And now a lot of people have talked also about this $500 that she keeps bringing up. $500 to a sex trafficking ring, that she was sold for that. Now people are saying she was an escort. And that, I guess that's like a running total guesstimation for escort. I don't know. Do you know? Let me down in the comments below. How much do escorts make these days? Who knows? Who knows? Anyways, she goes on talking about her experience. And then another thing, it just grates me, is her talking about it's odd what happens to the trauma brain. She said in 2020 podcast to explain why she returned to her traffickers, comparing it to Stockholm syndrome. And this is the kind of shit that drives me crazy. It's when someone, especially like Eliza Bleu, as I'm going to continue to get into, when someone claims that they are a victim and then uses that victimhood to not answer questions and gets completely irate when they are asked questions because she has gotten completely unhinged when she has been asked just some pretty simple, basic questions that it seems like she might be able to provide a little bit of detail. When we look at the Farmer Sisters, when we look at Virginia Giuffre, when we look at Tara Reid, we can see on their faces that it's a struggle for them to constantly have to bring this up. And they might not go into everything in absolute detail, but they still provide a modicum of, this is what happened, this was my story. It's kind of like an elevator speech. They have it in their head and they're able to kind of disseminate the amount of information that they feel comfortable putting out into the world. No one expects them to go into every minute detail. That would be incredibly painful. But the way that Eliza Bleu is using very specific terminology that is used within this sphere of victims and trying to understand and help them work through their pain and suffering. She's using that as a wall, as a block, as a cudgel, so that she doesn't have to respond to questions. And the minute that someone starts to act like that, when they're asked some basic questions, when that's their immediate response, oh, you have every right to start questioning the veracity and validity of their claims, because when it starts to not look right and it starts to smell fishy, there's a reason for that. And then this article continues. It goes into her time when she was in Chicago, claiming that she lived in a really horrible neighborhood. There was lots of gang activity and that she was sleeping on the floor because she was so afraid that she was going to get shot at. Well, her former roommate even says that she slept on the floor, but by choice because she was into these floor pillows at the time. And this is a former roommate that, as they go through in this article, she was actually asked by Eliza if she wanted to become an escort with Eliza. And Eliza was just going on and on about how much money that she was making and all of this stuff. It was so crazy. This former roommate just talks about how so much of what Eliza Bleu is saying and also the timing of things is just, it's not right. It doesn't add up. There's also this aspect that Blue was completely lying about the locale in which she was living in Chicago. She wasn't living in a gang area. She was actually living in a pretty affluent neighborhood. And it looks like, from the telling from these people, is that it was actually her parents that were floating her. And then a different friend said Blue moved to Los Angeles, but Wenzel doesn't remember hearing about her old friend being trafficked. Instead, she said Blue unsuccessfully tried to convince Wenzel to move in with her in California. She did not recall Blue calling home to the Quad Cities with the tales of being addicted to ice or living with a trafficked group of transgendered women in the Hollywood Hills. Wenzel even says that she keeps seeing these stories coming out of LA and believes that absolutely didn't happen. There's so much here. So, and then this is where a former roommate, she didn't provide her name, but she said that the pair lived in Wicker Park, an affluent, trendy Chicago neighborhood. And the roommate said Blue's parents were always supportive financially and that she was not in a precarious position. She said in a text message to the Daily Beast. And she said that the roommate does remember Blue sleeping on the floor, though not because of bullets. She slept on the floor by choice because she was into these floor pillows at the time. And that Bleu eventually bought a bed. So it's one of those things where this is someone who is using actual, real things that do happen to people, but building a story up, whether it's in her head, whether it's who knows what it's for. But from everything that I have been seeing, it does look like Eliza was just really trying to get famous. And I don't think she cared how she got famous. And that's a shame because, like I said, she's trying to get famous on the backs of survivors. You do not have to be a survivor to be an advocate for them, but lying about being one, that's just mean. Shame. Shame. So one of the things that led to a lot of censorship on Twitter and also here on YouTube is a music video in which Bleu is a dancer, and Bleu was trying to say that that was when she was being exploited, and so that was why it needed to be removed. But as we see here, in one 2012 video Bleu posted to YouTube, she filmed herself calling her mother to shock her with the news that she'd become a music video dancer, only to discover that her mother was happy for her. In the video, Bleu told her mother that she wanted to become a music video dancer because of her childhood admiration for the Fly Girls. Oh, sweetie. So in 2012, you want to be a video dancer, but in 2022, 2023, when that video is surfacing to call you out on your bullshit, you want to get it removed so quickly so that people don't start figuring out and tying everything together that you're basically you're a lying sack of shit. Because that's what this feels like. This is a bunch of lying and pretending and using people's real pain and suffering to elevate yourself, and then taking up, like I said, all of the fucking space in the room so that everyone's looking at you. And it's like, bitch, you're taking this away from real, actual survivors that likely have perpetrators still out there doing this to this day. They would probably love to name them and get them taken care of. Is our media going to do that? No. Is our FBI and police going to do that? No. Thank you, Eliza, for ruining it for everyone. And then the scary aspect becomes, was Eliza actually trying to get women into this industry, into this area of becoming escorts? Did she want to become a pimp? That's the question. Because it says here, around 2016, Wenzel claims that Bleu asked her to join her as an escort, promising that Wenzel could make $500 a night, an offer that stunned Wenzel and her husband. She continued to say she was absolutely loving it. She was bragging about it, saying she was making so much money. Now, I have nothing against people that do sex work. I think we have to do a lot in protecting anyone that's in sex work. If you have two consenting adults, I really don't think anyone should be in a place to judge that. But when we have someone who's claiming to be a survivor and an advocate for survivors that has a history of what looks like being an escort and asking friends if they want to join her, because I mean, this is just a friend who's willing to come forward and give this story. Did Eliza get other women into this? It is just it's so insane. Like, and it continues. It gets crazier. It gets crazier, y'all. So the next aspect of this is Eve's Angels, a Christian nonprofit that serves sex trafficking victims and women seeking to leave the commercial sex industry. So this is a woman. Her last name is Dunwald. So she is part of this Eve's Angels thing. And this is the organization that Bleu says saved her life. And Dunwald is someone that was happy to go to Twitter and put veracity and say that Eliza is telling the truth. You know, she claimed that Bleu is the real deal. Well, lo and behold, Dunwald, the woman that's part of this Eve's Angels Christian nonprofit, was actually sued for defamation in 2018. While Dunwald and her children were living with her family in Michigan, And her parents confronted her about her treatment of her daughter. And according to the lawsuit, in response, Dunwald and her group accused her parents of sexually abusing and trafficking children. And that was why her parents and her brother sued her for defamation. Like, this is a huge deal. And then the judgment that came down was ordered at $47,000 plus legal fees. So Dunwald was ordered to pay $47,000 plus legal fees in this defamation lawsuit. There is a video on Twitter of Dunwald, pretty much like right after this, saying that her roof had come down. Now, it wasn't a roof, it was just a rain gutter that came down. There's a huge difference. And claiming that that roof damage, really a rain gutter, was $50,000 worth of work that needed to be repaired. And she got donations for that. She got over like $46,000 in donations and then tweeted for another $3,500, which Eliza retweeted for her. Like I said, there's so much here. They're in those videos. Like I said, they're in the art. If you go down in the description box, you will see those videos that I'm talking about where they go into this in a lot more detail. But there is now a concern that Eve's Angels, this nonprofit, isn't as legit as it's purporting itself to be. And it's something that Eliza and Dunwald look like they have kind of been scratching each other's backs, as you may call. And it doesn't look good. It looks like a lot of collusion going on, alleged collusion, but that's what it looks like. There's just so much here. And then the last little bit I do want to say is this is a quote from Maria Farmer. So this is one of the very first people to come forward and speaking to the FBI, exposing Epstein in the late 90s. So this was, I think, around like 95, 96. She even said, "She clung to us from out of nowhere. She had none of the attributes of an Epstein victim, yet insinuated otherwise." Now, that is such a huge thing for someone like a survivor of Epstein to say. But the fact that she says it just kind of says so much about all of this. So if you want to see a little bit more of this article, I highly recommend you look at it because they, like them or hate them, they did do a pretty decent job at really going through all of this and really doing a huge deep dive into Eliza's background, the timelines, her different aliases. Like I said, this is a woman who it looks like has kind of tried to reinvent herself every 3 to 4 years since the late 90s, it seems. And it's definitely worth a read. Highly recommend that you check it out. There was another article that I came across that was talking about, does it matter that we have an anti-trafficking advocate whose story doesn't really add up? And this is on Unheard. Like I said, I have links to all of this down below that you can take a look at. And they say that, on multiple occasions, she implied that she was working closely with Twitter's new trust and safety team to ban popular hashtags used for trading this appalling content. This is content referring underage children. And that the extent of her role, though, has recently been called into question because her narrative as a supporter is completely falling apart. Because like I said, one of the things that brought Eliza so much notoriety and popularity was her saying, "I'm working with Musk and during this takeover and we're going to take down illegal child to, stop the exploitation of children." All very good things. Like I am an advocate for keeping children safe and not letting them get exploited. And like I said, I don't care where your ideological views are on. If we can, we can agree that we want children to be safe in this country and that they shouldn't be trafficked, they shouldn't be taken advantage of, and they shouldn't be used for people's nefarious means. I'm cool meeting in the middle with someone on the far right on that one. Like, I'm okay with that. I'll go out on that ledge. And in this article, they do kind of call out the hypocrisy of Blue because she's been a huge advocate for not censorship, for, not censoring things that shouldn't be censored, but then she's turning around as soon as all this inconvenient stuff is coming out and she's censoring people and she's using her now new connections to Musk and the Twitter safety whatever the frickin' is, to get them to remove content. And it's not because that content is even bad. Specifically, like the music video and stuff that she's getting removed off of multiple platforms. It's not like it was anything that looks illegal or suspicious. And the makers of that video even said that Eliza had been paid and that they own the full rights to that video and that they were more than happy to discuss the legal, to have legal get in on that one. But it just definitely seems like Eliza is trying to use her connections to get people censored and removed because it's inconvenient, because it's showing her as the grifter and the liar that she very, very likely is. And this article also says, few people ask any questions at all, of course, because another thing we've learned about sexual trauma is that victims are often blamed, shamed, and denied their experience. We know how important it is to be believed, so we don't question people who come forward with a harrowing tale of sexual abuse. And that is very true. A lot of people do not get believed when they talk about their stories. But someone like Eliza doing this in what looks like to be a huge, huge grift, it affects survivors. It really does. And it's really just, it's a really fucking horrible thing to do because it's going to make survivors more at risk of not being heard, not feeling comfortable coming forward. And it's this kind of shit that keeps perpetrators alive and well. Good going, Eliza. Good going. There was another video that I watched a little bit more from like the left area. And this was from Lucky Burrito at the Fearlessly Authentic podcast that she did with Manuel Defengo and Farron Balanced. This was a really, really good video. I highly recommend you check it out. I have it linked down in the description box below. It's like the very first video that I have linked, because she really just says exactly what I think is the crux of all of this. So let's take a listen.
Like
Yeah,
there's
I'm not
there's
really sure what
places there, there's not enough information here, and it's a really good story, I guess, for her, because I mean it's basically unverifiable in a lot of ways. And okay, so we could give her that. If even if we were to give her that one, it's like, why wouldn't you have named your accuser? That we're This is years later, right? Like, how could have a photographer guy gotten enough power to basically, like make you fear for your life in this way? And it's just, once you start bringing it up in that particular light, then, there's holes in it, because
yeah.
later on she talks about there being a musician that was also involved in this. And then she talks about how it was a high profile athlete later on. And it's just kind of like, I start to ask big questions, because it's not like I haven't talked to survivors before, tried to like assist them in some way, to somebody that's actually gonna be able to help them in a much better way than me. And ultimately, I've gone to different locations and learned about like how to specifically handle this type of stuff. And I mean, it's pretty simple, like, hey, you ask about it, and if you want to get some information because you're ultimately trying to figure out if there's been legal action taken, in the sense that there's a police report or something is happening. And then even more so, you have to watch out, if it's more of a monetary thing, you actually kind of have to dive into the reasoning behind why do you want to go for it in a monetary way, as opposed to it being a non-monetary, type thing, a more criminal thing. And for these reasons, it's like why looking at her story is strange, because it's not just me that asked these questions. It's gotten blocked. There's been a lot of other people before me. There's people that have basically been told that they can't ask about that stuff. Or, if you look at any myriad number of her like interviews on this thing, it's like, yeah, she comes on, she talks about like trafficking, but it's never about her story. And
Yeah,
that's
and
like a
that's
really
the
strange
thing.
thing.
It should be really easy that everyone's like, yeah, or like, I don't like to talk about my story, but I can reference you back to this interview that I did talk about it. You know what I mean? Like if you're going to be out there and be the person in front of this all the time, then you should, you know what I mean? Like you want to be a spokesperson for it, then you should be able to speak about it because you're going to give strength to other people who have survived things or, whatever. They have managed to make it through things. You're going to give them empowerment by telling your story or at least something. And then when the details start, like, coming out and they aren't adding up, I feel like where did she even come from? Like I felt like she just kind of like came out of the woodwork, and then I was looking into her behind the scenes, like, because like a friend of mine, we were both like, where did she even come from? Like, why does this is like a friend of everybody from Assange, and like, it was just kind of like, whoa, okay, like, and everyone just took the story that she's a survivor, and we can't say, definitively that she didn't survive something. It's just that the details that we have don't match what she said and what she's said on videos. Like it's different videos. She's saying completely contradictory things or completely the opposite, or she just gets like really laughing and giddy when you ask her a question.
So Defango did a really good job of just kind of doing a quick little sum up of, what I'm talking about here, and that is that there's just so many inconsistencies in her story, and that, some of this is kind of hard to, completely validate, but looking at, the Daily Beast article and what they were seeing and what they were able to get from different people that have known her for over 20 years, ex-boyfriends, ex-roommates, things like that. I think he did a really good job at just kind of, summing all of that up. And I think what Lucky Burrito said is just like so spot on. Like, thank you so much for articulating this like so perfectly, saying that if you're going to be out there in this space and being a spokesperson, and you're going to, be in front of all of this all of the time and be that spokesperson, then you should be able to speak about it because you are giving strength to other people that have survived, and you will empower them. And that, I think, is the biggest disservice here, is that I'm sure there were a lot of people that were looking up to Eliza. I mean, maybe, I don't know, because she does struggle to articulate, her story very well. So maybe survivors didn't find that, as empowering as they should be. But I think that I think what Lucky Burrito was saying is just so spot on, that Eliza has put herself out there as this spokesperson, and the media has just kind of used her as their focal point. They're what people look at when it comes to advocacy and survivors and all of this stuff. And I think for a lot of that, it is because of this dynamic of the media, conventional beauty, someone that's able to articulate and all of those things, and someone that's able to keep engagement on the screen for long enough time. But it does such a disservice, and it really does show your grift when you're unable to just kind of give that elevator speech. I don't mean that to come off cruel, but it's like when you cannot have a modicum of reality to your situation, and when you're just using all of these, hot code words, trauma brain. It's like you're using stuff that's in the vernacular, that's in this space specifically because it is how psychologists are terming different aspects of what is going on with these survivors and how things are affecting them. But it's just so hypocritical, because when we look at something like this, I don't know who a lot of these Twitter people are, but a screenshot was taken of Eliza's tweet on September 16th of 2020. If you financially grift off of victims and survivors, you are a predator. Is Eliza calling herself out? And then this is the list of almost all of the people that she is getting removed off of Twitter. All of these are privacy complaints that Eliza has filed against these content creators. And even Lucky Burrito is right there. It's not just people on the right, it's also people on the left, it's also people in the center that are getting censored. And when you see censorship happening, the minute that someone doesn't want their stuff exposed, that's when you know that something is going on? And this was a great thread from Open Secret. And then they said, here's a thread about Eliza Bleu, formerly known as Eliza Cuts, Eliza Seep, Eliza Knows. Give it a read. So they go through this huge thing. They say, imagine a public person who earns their living off of internet donations, raising awareness, claims to be a sex trafficking survivor, refuses to name her abusers. Wouldn't name abusers help others to stay away from them? And that is a huge, huge thing, because that was like when we look at like Epstein, that was why so many of those survivors were fighting for so long and trying to get the FBI and police and detectives to do their frickin' job, because they didn't want more and more, in that situation, girls to be getting affected by what Epstein was doing. With Eliza not coming forward, it does beg the question of, okay, if you're not going to name your perpetrators, and you say that someone that's financially getting off by being a survivor or pretending to be a survivor or advocating for survivors to get financial elevation, is she the predator? She won't name her alleged sex traffickers due to a fear of violence. Her father is a local elected official who got hundreds of thousands of votes running for lieutenant governor a few years ago. And they continue on. They say a public person naming their abuser makes them safer. Why? The abuser has no motivation to silence the victim before the victim can name them, since they have already been named. If anything ever happened to the victim, the abuser is the first person law enforcement would look at. This was another aspect of Eliza's story where she says that, my trafficker at the time was a high-profile athlete, but she will not say who that person is, and that by not naming who this person is she maybe putting other women at risk? I say yes. Eliza has blocked us, so feel free to help her protect women by naming this high-profile athlete she accuses of sex trafficking her. And they say it's really weird to see a person speak one way today, then see them 5 years ago speak in a completely different manner, accent, and tone. Chicago curvy model Eliza Knows claims to have refused a booking request to have sex for $150,000. Now, I don't want to get hit with a ding. I probably already have, but I don't want to get dinged anymore. So I'm not going to show this video. But if you want to check out this full thread, you can check it out on Twitter. It's an open secret. Like I said, I really don't know any affiliation of any of these things. Like I said, for me, it's about the issues. It's not about the ideological stance. But yeah, so do I think Eliza is lying? Yes, I do. I 100% think that Eliza has been using the convenience of the pandemic and people being kind of in a state of panic to elevate herself in an area that became very popular to be discussing. I think she's using it. I think she's a grifter, and I think she's been really clout chasing for what looks like over a decade and a half. This is a woman that wants to, what looks like, just get famous. She's been on dating shows. She's been on music videos. She's had different personas and different aliases. And to me, that's not someone who can be very trustworthy. When you're not wanting to be honest about who you are and your identity, it makes me question you. And that's basically what happened was, people started to ask questions, and Eliza really didn't like that. And she used her connection to Musk. She used her access. She used this now status of being elevated and using it both as a way to silence others that are questioning her, and then also using it as a shield from critique. And that is a bunch of bullshit, if you ask me. That's not what should be happening. It's wrong. And it is extremely disrespectful to anyone that has been a survivor to any extent. It exposes you more than than I think she realizes. Like, I don't think she even realizes how, even if she has been telling the truth, none of her actions validate that. All of her actions say, I'm in panic mode. I've been found out. I don't want to be found out. And now she's in hiding. Her tweets are protected. And now there's all of this stuff in the background. So many accounts are still locked. So many people are not able to get back in. And YouTube videos are being taken down or censored or, getting strikes against them. It's absolute bullshit. And it takes me back to what I was saying at the beginning. What does media integrity look like? How do we hold media, especially mainstream media, how do we hold their feet to the fire? And I don't want to say it's by just not believing anyone that they put in front of us. But I do think that it starts with us asking the question, why are they elevating this particular person? What does that media outlet have to gain for elevating that person? And what does that person have to gain by being elevated by that media platform? Because like I said at the very beginning, if they didn't vet her, shame on them. If they did vet her and continued to use her, it gets to even more of a conspiratorial aspect, because it's like, okay, so if you knew she was full of shit and everything she was saying was full of shit, then why did you still elevate her in a place and in a space where we're trying to protect different groups, women, transgender people, sex workers? Why are you now doing this? Now, I don't know about you. I'm extremely skeptical of pretty much every media that I watch. And that's why I watch a multitude of things from a multitude of perspectives and use that to try to form my perspective and my belief, with a little bit of fluidity in there to change my mind depending on different facts that come out and different things that happen and different things that I see in patterns and trends. I think this is such bullshit. And I'm so mad because, like I said, I was following Eliza. I thought she was doing good things. I thought she was standing up for I thought she was standing up for survivors and being that advocate, because we would never leave our homes and we would never be able to get away from our screens if we were constantly trying to do these deep dive background checks in every single person that media elevates and says, look at them and listen to their story. We wouldn't be able to get anywhere. But I do think that we need to question who the media is elevating, who they are promoting. And it's not just big mainstream media. It's also these higher elevated independent media and not so independent, because they're getting funded by lots of billionaires in the background, media outlets on YouTube. Who are they promoting? Who are they lifting up? Who are they elevating? We need to be willing to ask the questions. Well, I think Eliza is full of fucking shit. I'll be happy to come out and say I was wrong if I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong. I think this is a woman that has used her intelligence, used her connections, used her privilege to find a way to monetize the pain and suffering that survivors experience. And we have to call a spade a spade. That needs to be what happens in media when we see this kind of shit. We have to not be afraid to call it out. We can be totally willing and happy to retract or update and say, yeah, no, I was wrong. I missed this or I missed that detail. But this looks like a weaponization of power that Eliza has obtained. And it is just really, really frustrating, because it is so hard for survivors to come forward already. It's so hard for people to tell their stories. And this is going to affect people moving forward. And using, I think what really pisses me off the most is using this victim complex so that you can't get asked any questions, or using it to say, don't ask me questions. I can't talk about my story. That's just too much. It's just too much. Because that's basically what she has done. She has been so unable to even answer some basic ass questions. And looking at this timeline, seeing these videos and all of these different aliases, and that her dad is a politician with what looks like a lot of power and money and privilege. I mean, an over 500-acre farm. I think that was in one of these videos. It's just so fucking insane. And it's so disrespectful to anyone that has had sexual harassment, sexual abuse, that's been trafficked, that's been traumatized legitimately from all of this pain and suffering that people just love to inflict on humans. Humans are just so mean to each other. It drives me crazy. But this creates so much more of a dangerous situation. And it leads to this question of, what does media integrity look like? Because these are media outlets. So many of them have so much resources that they could have done a cursory glance at her background. They could have looked at these different videos and very easily seen them before she so conveniently used all of her connections to get everything censored. And that's the other thing too, just the absolute hypocrisy of someone who's saying that they are not for censorship and that, they're fighting for Assange. They're fighting for survivors. And then they turn around, and the minute that there's an inconvenient truth coming out about them, oh, I'm going to censor these people. Well, you're pretty much just kind of proving everyone's freaking point. You're basically doing the very thing that you are acting like you're not a part of, but you are. And you're using your connections and you're using your access to do it. Well, thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Please hit that subscribe button because I love it when you subscribe. Share with your friends. And as always, remember to stay safe, take care, and be kind to each other. And don't lie.